Welcome to Module 1 of SPED 150 Transitions. I'm glad you're here today. The first module is called Transition Foundations, and the title is intentional. Everything we do in Module 2 and 3, the assessment, the IEP writing, the family partnership, rests on what you learned this week. If that foundation is solid, the rest of the course makes sense. If it isn't, the tools and frameworks we hand you later won't hold. Our core question for this week is this: what does it mean to truly prepare a student with a disability for the life they want? And what does the law, the data, and the student's voice tell us about how well we've been doing that? Sit with that question and we'll come back to it all week. Most people entering this program have a working picture of what transition is. A meeting near graduation, some paperwork, a checklist someone hands you in April of a student's senior year. This module will ask you to set that picture aside. Transition, done properly, is a legally mandated, student-centered, years-long planning process. In Minnesota, it begins before 9th grade or the student turning 14. It spans employment, post-secondary education, independent living, self-determination, self-advocacy, and family partnerships. And when it is done well, grounded in assessment data, centered in the student's own vision, it changes outcomes in measurable ways. This week has three big threads we'll pull on. First is the legal foundation, what IDEA 2004 actually requires, and how Minnesota goes beyond the federal floor. Second is the data, post-school outcomes for students with disabilities and the gap between what transition planning can accomplish and what it has historically delivered. Third is student voice, not as a supplement to this work, but as the foundation. The phrase you will hear is person-centered planning. This week is a foundational week. There is no case study assignments yet. Your job is to read carefully, engage with the resources, and begin building the knowledge base that modules 2 and 3 will ask you to apply. Let's situate ourselves and where we are in the course before we go further. SPED 150 runs 3 weeks. Each week is one module. They build sequentially. Module 1 lays the conceptual and legal ground. Module 2 moves into the assessment and IEP writing, and Module 3 brings the IEP to completion and prepares you to lead a real transition planning team. Module 1 is where you are now. Highlighted here in the navy, you will notice that the core questions for each module are not generic. They are designed to pull you toward the most important professional challenge in each phase of the work. Hold on to those questions as you read this week. They will help you see why each resource is there. A few logical anchors worth knowing now. All work is submitted through Google Classroom. Everything is due by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. The course totals 135 points across 3 assignments and 3 reflections. None of that should feel overwhelming. The design is intentional and each piece builds on the last. These are the 6 learning outcomes for the full course. I want to walk through them briefly because they are not decorative. They are actual commitments this course is making to you. Learning Objective 1 is about legal foundations. By the end of this course, you will be able to explain what IDEA requires, interpret what that means for the IEPs you write, and understand what Indicator 13 compliance actually looks like and why it matters. Learning Outcome number 2 is about transition assessment. You will learn to gather, interpret, and synthesize data across all domains transition planning requires, not just 1 or 2, but the full picture of a student's life and aspirations. Learning Outcome 3 is about writing the IEP, not filling out a form, writing a document that's specific, legally compliant, and generally about the student who you are with. Learning Outcome 4 through Learning Outcome 6 addresses self-determination, family partnership, and community connections. The threads that together make a transition plan more than paperwork. Module 1 directly addresses the first 4 of these. The readings, the assignments this week are not random. They are mapped to these outcomes. When you sit down to read, that's worth keeping in mind. Your signature product for Module 1 is the Transition Foundations infographic and rationale. It is worth 25 points and it's due by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Here's what the assignment is asking you to do. You will create a one-page visual reference tool, something you can actually use in your teaching practice, not something that lives in a folder and never gets opened again. The infographic must address 4 things: what transition is, what the law requires at both the federal and Minnesota level, and what the outcomes data shows, and what student-centered transition requires. Then, in a half-page rationale, you will explain the reasoning behind 2 or 3 of your key design choices. One more thing, the syllabus asks you to align your infographic to a specific student you work with. That is not a throwaway prompt. It is the difference between producing a generic summary and actually connecting the material to a real child whose future is being shaped right now by how well you are planning. The standards alignment for this assignment is listed on the slide. If these codes are unfamiliar to you at this point, that's fine. We can return to them throughout the course. The Module 1 reflection is 5 points, also due Sunday. It uses a structured format called square, circle, triangle, and each shape has specific meaning. The square represents something that's squared with you, a concept or idea from this week that confirmed or deepened something you already believed about transition planning. Maybe the law said something you expected. Maybe the reading reinforced an instinct you've had in practice. A circle represents something you are still circling on. A question, tension, an idea that you haven't resolved. These are often the most valuable responses because they tell us where your thinking is generally alive and unsettled. A triangle represents 3 key takeaways, 3 specific things you are carrying into your practice from this module. Not vague impressions, but specific, nameable things. On grading, vague answers don't demonstrate an understanding. For example, I learned a lot about transition is not the type of response that I'm looking for. I want something that has depth, that shows that you have engaged in the module. Here are the readings for Module 1, organized by category. In the law and policy category, you have an anchor resource. The first is IDEA 2004 definition of transition services. I want to encourage you to read the actual statutory language, not just a summary of it. Knowing what the law says is important in its specific words. It's essential when you are in an IEP meeting and someone challenges any type of planning decision. In Whose Future Is It Anyway? The author gives you a framework for person and family-centered planning. This core reading will help you develop an understanding on how entangled planning is with the student and family at the center of the whole IEP. Any other readings that I might throw on there, please read and engage with every resource this module has. In addition to your readings, Module 1 includes video resources and 2 professional websites to explore. On the video slide, start with Module 1 overview video, which you're watching now. It will orient you to the week's question, readings, and assignments before you dive in. Video Lecture 1, What is Transition and Why It Matters, is a focused lecture tied directly to the module's content. On the exploration side, 2 sites are worth bookmarking as permanent professional references. The Minnesota Department of Education secondary transition page has everything Minnesota specific: the Youth and Transition Framework, age-appropriate assessment resources, and MDE training modules. There's also the Iris Center module for secondary transition. There's 2 options that you can complete with embedded learning checks. This will help enrich your knowledge of person-centered planning. These sites are really not one-time reads. They are resources you can return to throughout your entire career. Here's your week 1 checklist. everything you need to do before Sunday at 11:59 p.m. In the read column, you have Idea 2000 Forward, Whose Future Is It Anyway, pages 4 through 41. In the watch column, Module 1 Overview, video first, then the video lecture. In the Explore column, MDE's secondary transition page and scavenger hunt, as well as the IRIS module. In the Submit column, the 2 assignments due this week is the assignment A1, your infographic and rationale, which is 25 points, and your reflection, which is a square, circle, triangle for 5 points. Both are due at 11:59 p.m. Sunday in the Google Classroom. If you have questions about either assignment, please reach out to me via the phone or email. Before you go, here's what this week is actually asking you. Read carefully, sit with the data, let it be uncomfortable if it needs to be. The gap between what transition planning can accomplish and what it has historically differed for students with disabilities is real. It's documented, and it is the reason this course exists. By Sunday, you will have produced a foundational infographic you can use in your actual practice, and a reflection that captures what your thinking is right now, what is settled and what isn't. That's exactly where you need to be at the start of this work. Module 2 builds directly on the information from this week. You will bring your legal knowledge, your understanding of data outcomes, and your commitment to the student voice into the assessment and IEP writing that begins next Monday. What you do this week is not a warm-up, it's the foundation. I'm glad you're here. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out via an email or a text message. Thanks.